Good. You can see it?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll get started. Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavit Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavath Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamayah Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamritaduhe Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we are in the session today where we are going to be looking at essentially concepts from the second, third, and fourth and see what the flow of thought is. But one thing that I left off last time, which was actually since we completed the fourth chapter, is to actually chant the entire fourth chapter. And so today we will just take about maybe 5 minutes or less to chant the entire fourth chapter. This is something which I remember Meena Shankar always wanted us to think about at the end of the chapters. So I'm not sure whether she's here today. I think she's not here, but we will chant the whole fourth chapter. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha Atha Chaturtho Dhyayaha Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavanaham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Rajarshayo Viduhu Sakale Neha Mahata Yogo Nashtaf Parantapa Sa Evayam Maya Tedhya Yogaf Proktaf Puratanaha Bhaktosi Me Sakha Cheti Rahasyam Hyetaduttamam Arjuna Uvacha Aparam Bhavato Janma Param Janma Vivasvataha Kathame Tadvijaniyam Tvamadau Proktavaniti Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahuni Me Vyatitani Janmani Tavacharjuna Tanyaham Veda Sarvani Natvam Vetaf Parantapa Ajopi Sannavyayatma Bhutanam Ishvaropi San Prakritim Swamadhisthaya Sambhavam Yatma Mayaya Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanir Bhavati Bharata Abhyuttanamadharmasya तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहं परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे जन्म कर्म च मे दिव्यम् एवं यो वेत्ति तत्त्वतः त्यक्त्वा देहं पुनर्जन्म नैति मामेति सोऽर्जुन वीतरागभयक्रोधाः मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूता मद्भावमागताः ये यथा मां प्रपद्यन्ते तांस्तथैव भजाम्यहं मम वर्त्मानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्याः पार्थ सर्वशः काङ्क्षन्तः कर्मणां सिद्धिं यजन्त इह देवताः क्षिप्रं हि मानुषे लोके सिद्धिर्भवति कर्मजा चातुर्वर्ण्यं मया सृष्टं गुणकर्म विभागशः तस्य कर्तारमपि मां विद्य कर्तारमव्ययम् न मां कर्माणि लिम्पन्ति न मे कर्मफले स्पृहा इति मां योऽभिजानाति कर्मभिर्न स बध्यते एवं ज्ञात्वा कृतं कर्म पूर्वैरपि मुमुक्षुभिः कुरु कर्मैव तस्मात् त्वं पूर्वैः पूर्वतरं कृतं किं कर्म किमकर्मेति कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि यज्ञात्वा मोक्षसे शुभात् कर्मणो ह्यपि बोधव्यं च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोधव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः कर्मण्यः कर्म यः पश्येत् अकर्मणि च कर्म यः स बुद्धिमान् मनुष्येषु स युक्तः कृत्स्न कर्म कृत् यस्य सर्वे समारम्भाः कामसङ्कल्पवर्जिताः ज्ञानाग्निदग्धकर्माणं तमाहुः पण्डितं बुधाः त्यक्त्वा कर्मफलासङ्गं नित्यतृप्तो निराश्रयः कर्मण्यभिप्रवृत्तोऽपि नैव किञ्चित् करोति सः निराशीर्यत चित्तात्मा त्यक्त सर्वपरिग्रहः शारीरं केवलं कर्म कुर्वन्नाप्नोति किल्बिषम् यदृच्छालाभसन्तुष्टः द्वन्द्वातीतो विमत्सरः समः सिद्धावसिद्धौ च कृत्वापि न निबध्यते गतसङ्गस्य मुक्तस्य ज्ञानावस्थितचेतसः यज्ञायाचरतः कर्म समग्रं प्रविलीयते ब्रह्मार्पणं ब्रह्म हविः ब्रह्माग्नौ ब्रह्मणाहुतं ब्रह्मैव तेन गन्तव्यं ब्रह्म कर्म समाधिना दैवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञावपरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्वति श्रोत्रादीनीन्द्रियाण्यन्ये संयमाग्निषु जुह्वति शब्दादीन् विषयानन्ये इन्द्रियाग्निषु जुह्वति सर्वान् इन्द्रियकर्माणि प्राणान् कर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयमयोगाग्नौ जुह्वति ज्ञानदीपिते Dravya yajnastapo yajnaha yoga yajnastatha pare swadhyaya jnana yajnascha yataya samshita vrataha apane chukvati pranam prane panam tatha pare pranapanagati ruddhva pranayama parayanaha apare niyataharaha pranan praneshu jugvati sarvepyete yajna vidaha yajna kshapita kalmashaha yajna shishtamrita bhujaha yanti brahma sanatanam nayam lokosya yajnasya Kutonyah kuru sattama evam bahuvidha yajnaha vitata brahmano mukhe karmajan vidhitan sarvan evam jnatva vimokshase shreyan dravyamayat yajnat jnana yajnastat no shreyan dravyamayat yajnat Jnana yajna parantapa sarvam karma kilam partha jnane parisamapyate tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninastattvadarshinaha yajnatva na punarmoham evam yasyasi pandhava Yena bhutanyasheshena drakshyasyatmanyatho mayi apichetasi papebhyaha sarvebhya papakrittamaha sarvam jnanaplavenaiva vrajinam santarishyasi yathaidhamsi samidhognihi bhasmasat kuruterjuna Jnanagni sarvakarmani bhasmasat kurute tatha nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitramiha vidyate tatsvayam yoga samsiddhaha kalenatmani vindati shraddhavan labhate jnanam Tatpara sanyatendriyaha jnanam labdhva param shantim achirena adhikachati agnyashchachartadhanascha samshayatma vinashyati nayam lokosti na paraha na sukham samshayatmanaha yoga sanyasta karmanam Jnana sanchinna samshayam atmavantam na karmani nibhatnanti dhananjaya tasmad ajnana sambhutam hristam jnanasinatmanaha chitvainam samshayam yogam atishthotishta bharata Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Juna Samvade Jnana Karma Sanyasa Yogo Nama Chaturtodhyaya. Good. So we finished the chanting. Now let's get into the actual reflection time itself. So we said that we want to look at the key concepts from chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4. So this is definitely not a very easy task, because there are so many concepts, and to try to weave it was, I don't know, I found it a little difficult even to really recognize what are we looking for, what are we really hoping to get out of Bhagavad Gita, first of all. So the idea was, okay, to recognize why are we studying Bhagavad Gita? And if each one of you can give me your perspective of just starting off with why are we studying Bhagavad Gita? And from here on, we will see how the second, third, and fourth can be linked. So maybe one word answer from each one of you, just one word,
Self-realization.
Self-realization, wow. The ultimate, okay. That's perfect because that's what my next slide is going to show you also. Okay, anything
Right
else?
way of living, Vasati.
Right way of living. Yes, yes. And that is what actually the second, third, and the fourth chapter leading to the aspect of Ishvara is going to show the right way of living, because it starts with there, right? It starts with really understanding how we can lead a life. Okay. Anything else?
Infinite happiness.
Infinite happiness. So this is, we call it sukha prapti and dukkha nivritti, like they say, dukkha, sorrows be bygone. So, say goodbye to sorrows totally. So that way, the only thing that is left behind is infinite happiness. Very nice. Anything else?
Give up our desires. I mean, we cannot do it. Slowly.
Yeah. Actually, more than, and this is something that, we can start with reduction of desires, having control over our desires, which is because when I say totally give up my desires, that is also a good term, actually, giving up desires and allowing whatever needs to happen to come into my life, right? So that's how you can look at it. Yes, very good.
Contentment, right? That's the main.
Yes, total contentment. Yeah, and that's what, so many times, we are looking for contentment and we think if I sit down and totally just meditate, that I will be contented. But that doesn't lead me to the infinite happiness. That doesn't, because for that moment in time, that I might be sitting for meditation, I can do it. But as soon as I get up, I'm immediately thinking about what next that I have to do, and that leads to a sense of an agitation, that leads to the desires that we talked about, and it doesn't give me that infinite happiness. I'm purposely using the words that you have used because that can connect to the chapter. Okay, so starting with what Meenu started with, which is self-realization. So Bhagavad Gita ultimately is showing us that this Sunitha, who I think I am, okay? This Sunitha today is going through a lot of, I'm not saying in a negative way, but I'm saying that this Sunitha today sometimes is confused about really what her role is, her role as a mother, her role as a sister, her role as a worker, and everything. This Sunitha is really confused. And in this confusion, what happens is that because I don't know exactly what my role is, anything and everything I do, it leads to some issue or the other. When I say issue, sometimes that role or the duty or the action I do, which is connected to that role, it gives me happiness, and sometimes it gives me sorrow. Okay. And since I don't have a right attitude of right view of what that happiness is, and because it gives me that small amount of happiness each time, I think that that particular thing which gave me happiness is the right thing for me. So I keep going towards it. And it is all because I have taken this identity of Sunitha. That Sunitha, using this equipment of body, mind, and intellect, is actually looking for happiness in the small things. And when I don't get it, it leads to unhappiness. So what I do, I think that, okay, that thing is giving me happiness. I keep going against to it all the time. And that is what Sunitha is doing. Now, Bhagavad Gita, very, very interestingly enough, right from the second chapter. And that is why I wanted to tell you that second chapter is the start. That shloka of second chapter, 11th shloka. Ashochya nanvashochasvam prajnavadamshcha bhashasi gatasoon agatasoomshcha nanushochanti panditaha. That shloka itself immediately takes you to self-realization. Okay. It is basically trying to show me that I am, this Sunitha is actually a combination of one, which is my transactional role, which is here. I'm showing this Vachyartha. Vachyartha meaning transactional role. Sunitha is just transacting in this world in so many different ways. So Sunitha is that transactional role plus something else, which is much, much bigger than this finite Sunitha. And that is that Om, which is represented here. And that Om is really actually the infinite happiness that just now Amlan talked about. And that infinite happiness is actually I, that is me. But because I've taken this role of Sunitha, I look for that happiness outside. What is happening at that moment is every time when I'm looking outside for an object or a relationship or a situation or an activity, at that moment in time, my mind, which was agitated, is looking, gets calmed down because I got that. So the minute I got that, I'm actually touching that aspect of Brahman within me, which is this infinite happiness. So then what happens is I tend to think that that happiness is outside, but actually it's the mechanism is the other way around, where the minute I get something, I actually am touching that absolute happiness in me. And that Lakshyartha is that. So this part of it in shloka number, that 11, shloka of 2, already it is telling us that gata agata sumshcha, Krishna is reminding Arjuna in that particular shloka that you are grieving for things which are, gone and not yet gone. That is what gata suna agata sumsha means. You're grieving for something who are gone already or are in the process of going. Whereas that is not what you should be doing. And then he gives this word panditaha. Panditaha, which refers to the wise people. So in that one shloka itself, which is, maybe I should put the shloka so you could see it, but it's shloka number 211. So he says, you're grieving for those who should not be grieved, yet you speak words of wisdom. The wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead. So you see, in just that one word of gata agata sumshcha, he's showing that at the end of the day, people who have already gone and people who are living and not yet gone, you are worried about that, but you have to think about the ultimate, which is what the panditas would talk about. So this is our problem right now. The problem for us is Sunitha is so identified with her transactional role. And this transactional role actually is superimposed on that absolute happiness, which is Lakshyartha here. And in this world, they both appear as one, and we get fooled more and more by a transactional one. We are not able to see this because we are so identified with this Sunitha. Okay. And so self-realization, which Meenu just mentioned, which what we are looking at is, in this one diagram you can see is, we have to realize that I am this absolute happiness, which is here, and I'm not this. So this transition from this transactional me to this thing is what ultimately Bhagavad Gita is all about. And that from the beginning itself in chapter 2, he gives that idea. And it's a very, so chapter 2 goes into only the theory aspect of what that knowledge is, which is called Sankhya Yoga. And once he is given that Sankhya Yoga, then Krishna then comes down one notch after the other. Then he reminds Arjuna about his role as a warrior. And then he tries to tempt him, and we will be going through those particular shlokas. I want to give you that. And then every time he's trying to bring this role part of it, he just keeps on telling him, you're just taking up a role, you are confusing your role with the absolute. So, and then finally in so many of the shloka, and then finally he gives him a glimpse of how one can transform this transactional role into something more meaningful, and into more meaningful and then he gives this the lakshanas of the self-realized person, and that part of it. And again, like I said, when I go to chapter 2, I will show you that flow. And having given that, you see that in chapter 3, Arjuna gets confused. Arjuna is like, okay, because you can see Arjuna was still very in grief, so to speak. He is not able to focus his complete attention. And so even though here you have the guru giving you the total knowledge, Arjuna is confused. It's like, he's like, okay, Krishna, you're telling me about all this high funda knowledge, but tell me, how is that really applicable to me? And that is why chapter 3, Krishna just comes all the way down and he gives him a practical suggestion of how this vachyartha, this transactional I, can be really improved through this technique of karma yoga. And once that whole chapter of karma yoga is explained very well, then in chapter 4, Arjuna, he recognizes that Arjuna now needs really a mentor who he can look up to. Up till now, Krishna was like a buddy, so as a friend, he was actually giving him all this knowledge. And then now Krishna now wants to give him his lakshyartha. So Krishna explains from where he's coming from. That is Krishna at the lakshyartha level, and now he at that level of being explaining his position as really the God of the universe, as Jagat Guru. He gives him then the knowledge, gives him more ideas, more advice, more knowledge about really giving himself as an example. And then he gives that knowledge even more. And then he even prescribes in chapter 4 a lot of the exercises or yajnas. And with that yajna, finally, Arjuna is brought even closer to understanding how he should be performing his role. So that's why this transition from 2nd chapter to the 3rd chapter to the 4th chapter, you see concepts of really what is the quality, if you will, of that ultimate reality, and how is that exhibited in somebody like a wise person, because we need those wise people who are role models for us. And after having given the lakshyartha of a wise person, you will see how Krishna is telling Arjuna about, trying to be one and trying to show him the pitfalls of where he is, which is what we need to. We need to understand, where am I going wrong? What is it that I'm taking up something which I should be cognizant about? So just to give you that background here on, and so this is where we are heading to, self-realization, self-realizing that we are that ultimate Om, and the role of Bhagavan in making us understand that aspect. Okay. Any questions or thoughts here? So you can see in one slide, you can really talk about so much of Bhagavad Gita. And I'll probably bring this slide more and more, even when we go to the 5th chapter, to see what it is. So now we need a very sharp intellect to disassociate ourselves from this aspect of who I am today and who I really am. For this, I need a very, very subtle intellect to separate this aspect. And that separation can happen only through knowledge. I can be doing a lot of other sadhanas and hoping that I will get there. But ultimately, if I have the knowledge, then what I do as the exercise will work. And like I said, a very simple way of looking at it, when we always do is, for example, if I want to lose weight, what we say this, if I go to the doctor and the doctor tells me, if you do this, this will be your phalam, you will get it, then I will do it. So I need to be convinced first. And after that, when I do this exercises or whatever to lose weight or whatever, then I will definitely, keep to my goal. But without knowing it, if I just look at somebody on Facebook who has lost 30 pounds or whatever, and I say, okay, I'm also going to do this, it may last for a short time. It won't be there for a long time, right? So that's why knowledge is such an important aspect. Knowledge is what makes our intellect more subtle. And when our intellect is very subtle, we will be able to stick to our goals of where we want to go. And that is the need for you. And I want to bring this chart too, which we have talked about before, about recognizing. So here we said this Lakshyartha, meaning my absolute reality self, is that none other than that Brahman, which through Maya has created this whole world. And in this Maya, we have Ishvara, who is none other than that Krishna, who is really telling us about what this universe is and our own place as a jiva in this whole universe. So these two slides I wanted to bring as the way of connecting all these aspects here. So this is your Lakshyartha principle Brahman, and we are here Jiva with this 5 layers of gross body, subtle body, and causal body, etc. And we have confused ourselves in thinking that I am this limited person in this body, but in reality, I'm this absolute Brahman. So in chapter 2, as we talked about, and here I'm going to go through, as you go through the verses, I thought this is a better way of looking at it. We find that, we have Arjuna, who actually comes to Krishna, who, tells Krishna about how depressed he is, how dejected dejected he is. And in this day and age, as we all know, depression seems to be the word of the year or word of the day. So many people are either actually depressed or they think they're depressed. And here too, you see Arjuna was very depressed and he goes to Krishna. And then finally he says, in the first chapter, he was just complaining and complaining and complaining. If you think about it, of course, he was very sorrowful, but he really didn't want to fight at all. Finally, only when in verse number 9, when he says, I will not shadi mam tuam prapannam, that shloka there. When he says that I will not fight, when he gives up, he surrenders to Krishna. That is when Krishna finally starts his teachings. And in shloka number 11, we find that, I said about Gatasun, Agatasun, that shloka. He starts to explain about this aspect of telling Arjuna, who are you really killing? Are you killing this physical body of the person who is going? Or are you killing that ultimate, this Lakshyartha versus Vachyartha? Who are you really killing? And then he, in this shlokas, he explains about that ultimately all this time scale is only for the body and not for the ultimate. And then he explains about Matra Sparshas to Kaunteya Shitosha Sukhada. He talks about how it's only, it's the body that goes through childhood, youth, and old age. That ultimate Atma doesn't do that. So our ultimate Atma remains. And then in Shloka 16, he starts to explain that qualities of that Atma. Not that Atma has any qualities, but we like to look at only things from qualities. If something doesn't have a quality, we are not able to understand. We want something which has a shape, size, weight, or different colors, or different taste. It has to taste, or it has to smell well, or it has to sound well. So only when that appeals to us, right? So that we call as qualities, but then Atma doesn't have any qualities at all. So that quality-less Atma, he then starts to explain in these shlokas of 16, 17, 18, and then all the way through. He just gives so many different ways to explain that Atma. And, he even talks about, how we go through different clothes and everything, but Atma is absolutely pure. So he gives that whole thing here. And then when he comes to the shlokas afterwards, he starts to explain to Arjuna about now coming from our layman's perspective. How can we look at this Atma? Is that Atma, can we, since we cannot feel, taste and everything, what is it? So he says about how it is Ashcharyavat Vadati Tathaiva, that shloka, which is in 29. This Ashcharyavat Pashyati Kaschidenam Ashcharyavat Vadati. It is such a wonder of wonders. You can neither explain about it. At the same time, only those people who have actually, quote unquote, experienced it will be able to recognize how it is the most wonderful thing. So he gives all that thing about Atma, again referring to the Lakshyartha aspect. And then finally, he really comes down and tells him that from his role level, how he should act in this world. So all this he explained here. Then you see, again, the Karma Yoga part of it starts here. But this is still in a very theoretical stage. He tries to explain to him how he should perform his duty. And then after explaining this, he tries to even give an idea for him about how it should not be looked at. What is the aspect it should not be? And then ultimately in shloka number 47 is the most famous shloka of chapter 2 of Karma Yoga. This is Karmanevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. But more importantly, after he gives this, the actual statement of Karma Yoga is given in actually the shloka number 48, which is Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. Sorry, is that Samatvam Yoga Uchyate? Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. That shloka is in 48. And after he explains this, then he goes into explaining about what is Karma Yoga and what is ordinary karma. That part of it also he gives here with all this part of it here. Then he comes to giving the role model, who is really that wise person and how does he sit, how does this Sthita Prajna Lakshanas, all this was given here. Very nice to meditate upon these shlokas, because when we meditate, in the sense contemplate, actually meditation is not the right word here, contemplation on each of these shlokas, because they let us, there's some practical suggestions here too, which you would see that Dhyayatu Vishayan Pumsaha, that shloka comes up in 62 to 63, that shlokas, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsamha, which really is practically for all of us, where we are in this world of objects and everything, what happens, the downward fall, that is explained here. And then how does he walk, on this self-explanation, this one. And then finally, in chapter 2, you see how he, through some very beautiful examples on, especially this one, the water of the ocean, how he says, the wise person, any amount of whatever we may say to the wise person doesn't get affected at all. Just like how, in an ocean, like Lake Michigan or something, if you think about it, all the waters, that goes into, well, that's a lake, but think about the Pacific Ocean or Atlantic Ocean. The ocean takes all the waters, but it doesn't really, it doesn't say, okay, now I'm totally full, I don't want to take it. It just accepts it. So that shloka is given here in 70 here. So that was chapter 2. And then you see, having explained this chapter 2, you see that Arjuna is confused, and he starts off with asking the question on, you've explained from the highest level, this Lakshyartha level, and you've also explained from the Vachyartha level. Tell me, what should I really do? So from here, the practical aspect of chapter 3, he gives him. First, he starts off by saying that don't try to just meditate, don't, and you will get there. Self-realization doesn't happen that way. So he gives that, and then he starts to explain to him from nature's perspective, how nature works, how in the nature everybody does their duty in the form of a yajna. He gives this idea of what really yajna is. Yajna is not something that Homa Kundam and doing all the fire rituals and everything, but it's actually, idea was to recognize my role in the midst of everyone. So it is all about teamwork. And through teamwork, what is leadership? That is how he explains this, how if every individual does their duty, they are a leader, not a leader, somebody who tells you what to do, but leadership is through being a role model. And that is what we see in the shloka number 21. In shloka 21, he talks about how to be a role model. And then he gives examples from King Janaka and others. And then finally, he gives his own example. He says, look at me, here I'm your buddy, but see how I act in this world. I look at things and everything. And so that is the art of teaching by example he gives. And ultimately this ego, we always talk about this ego. I should not act with the ego, right? So that ego aspect, he brings this, how doership, how does that ego really come? And that ego is because of our own, the gunas, the sattva, rajas, tamas. So here he introduces this aspect of sattva, rajas, tamas. And finally, he explains also how to act in this world by not, likes and dislikes and everything that, he talks about how we can avoid this. And he gives some idea of really what is sin and the desire and anger, shloka number 37, which again, this is which again comes up in chapter 4. So, and then this aspect of desire is explained here. So that was 3. And then in 4th, now you see the transition of Krishna from being a friend to he elevating himself. So you see, he explains Krishna first as just an ordinary friend, then a very super friend, by telling him that, see, look at me. I know this is how I am trying to be a role model for you. And now Krishna is elevating himself even more to being an Ishvara. And also here he gives him even more how this karma yoga can be done by really giving up the doership. How do you give up the doership? That aspect in chapter 4 was very beautifully pointed out. So for that, first Krishna feels he should give Arjuna some idea of where this knowledge is coming from. Because, for all of us, we don't want something which is, we tell something and we don't show from how many people have benefited from it. So for that reason, first Krishna gives Arjuna the comfort level because he wanted Arjuna to develop some Shraddha. That is most important, So Shraddha have to develop faith in the Guru, in the Shastras, and on Ishvara. So that is Shraddha. Shraddha is active faith when compared to blind faith. So that Shraddha he wanted him to develop, and therefore he starts to give him that idea of who's a guru, who's and how. So for that he explains. And then he explains from the devotee standpoint, people, what kind of people do we have in the world? And how he tries to tell him that no matter what, as Ishvara is available for everybody. And so here, those are the things that he gives here. First, the Guru Parampara, then explaining about himself, how, and then all this Paritranaya Sadhunam, all the shlokas come here. And then finally, he explains about the devotees. And then the forecast system, we talked a lot, we discussed quite a bit about it. And then from there, ultimately, we are all, like we said earlier, we are all we are human beings, but we think we are human doings. We are always doing some action. So what is that action? And then he again comes to some very nice shlokas about the great people who are able to recognize really when they should act and when they should not act. So that aspect was given here. And finally, there is the 12 yajnas. Like we said, yajna is basically, it is the act of surrendering my ego, or the chart which I had for Lakshyartha and Vachyartha. It's actually surrendering that Vachyartha into that Lakshyartha. Surrendering my small self, limited, finite self, into that ultimate infinite self. That is the yajna. So only when I do that can I get closer to my goal and to really understand who I am, and what I'm doing is all ultimately a role. So that's why these yajnas came out, and how there are different yajnas prescribed, and we can take any of these yajnas and practice. And so that was given here. And ultimately, more information about really what is self-knowledge, and how that knowledge is the ultimate purifier, and how ultimately, he gives this beautiful thing on Shraddha. Finally, he ends up with that shloka on Shraddha on, I think it was 439, Shraddhavan labhate jnanam, and to explain that Shraddha is ultimately the most important qualification for all of us, because when I have the Shraddha, that will help me to become more and more pure and more closer to Ishvara. So that was in shloka number 39. And finally, he talks about it's only with this knowledge that we can cut all kind of doubts and all negativities within us. So this is the just a view of 2 to 4 to give you that flow of thought. I hope that was useful. I don't know. Any thoughts or any, and of course, we always end with asking what was your favorite shloka in chapter 4. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, and also give your shloka that resonated for you the most in chapter 4, that'll be nice to hear.
I think one good one is Ye Athamam Prapaddante Tangstataiva Bhajamiham. That one is
Uh-huh.
good sloka.
Yeah, nice. That is shloka number
11.
11. Okay.
Mamo Vartanu Vartante Manusya Partha Sarvasa.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, so comforting, right? This is so comforting, which Amran, I'm glad you brought this up because this shows that it doesn't matter who you are, in whatever, even if you're the worst of human beings, even for such a person, there is the possibility for liberation.
Yeah, that is nice one.
Yeah. This chapter has so many very popular shlokas, right? That Paritrana is Sadhuna, and then Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Brahmarpana Brahmahavi. Those
Brahmarpanam Brahmavi. There are a lot of slokas like that.
lot of shlokas in chapter. Minu, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, 39 and 40. 39 is because it just said how the faith is so important. And 40th, it tells the opposite. If you don't have faith, you will not be happy. And so specifically, not in this world, not in any other world. You'll never be happy. So never ever doubt. So there's like a big danda in 40th to tell us, don't doubt, have faith.
Correct.
So they both go together so well, tied up.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
One thing I like about whenever Krishna is teaching, he always tell both the sides. It is not only for this sloka, Davan Lavata Gyanam. In many places, he tells, do this, don't do this. Kind of.
Right. Right.
That is very nice actually. So that we
Yeah.
get the full picture of it.
Correct. And he doesn't, he's very also so positive. So he always gives the positive aspect of it first.
Yeah.
And then he says, okay, if you don't do this, because if you keep on telling, we always tell our children, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else? Suvarna, is there anything that appealed to you?
The summary, Hariom, the summary was excellent. That really helped put the picture together, and the way how Bhagwan is leading us. Because at that point, I did not register for me. I thought that Arjuna, that Bhagwan is showing himself, is showing the avatar and everything towards 9, 10.
Correct.
Actual, that he is Bhagwan. Up until now, if we are walking in Arjuna's shoes, we are still thinking of him as our Priya friend, our Priya cousin, our Priya, Sakha. It's always, it's still that mode. We are not going still to the mode of where we are calling him. No, he is the ultimate. He's all of this, and also that connection when you said that he's leading up to that and he's starting off over here. That's the point that I was like, that got me thinking, okay, yes, he has started over here. Because up until now, I kept thinking that it was in 9, 10, 11, where he says, I'm going to give you the most important Raja, secret knowledge and everything.
Correct.
Oh,
yeah.
This is something that you definitely got me thinking about. So thank you. That I like your pointing out that Bhagwan has started revealing himself from here onwards. So
yeah. There are so many aspects of Bhagavad Gita. I mean, it's to study, and to every shloka can offer so much. I did not even touch upon some of the aspects like how anger management or depression management. There is enough information out there too for those things.
Very nice summary you did, and the connection between all the chapters and different point of views. Very nice. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that, it's not as if sometimes when you take a shloka, you might think, oh, okay, I already saw that previously. What is the difference? But the difference has to be seen in the light of where Arjuna is in his journey. In the beginning, Krishna had to explain to him in a certain way. And then as he progressed, as he becomes more mature, and even for us, that's a measure of spiritual progress, is when a certain shloka appeals to me, I know that this is the reason why, because I need this knowledge. I think I don't need to be told that, okay, get up and fight or whatever. No, I need some more information. So what is the shloka that is the right one for me? So that there's just so many ways to look at Bhagavad Gita,
And another one I like is this Name Karmani Limpanti and Name Karma Phales Priya. So here basically he's telling his divinity, his character, he's telling who I am. Basically, the karma doesn't bind me and I don't have any priya. Still, I am working.
Yeah, so beautiful. Anybody else has anything?
Very nice summary. Sunitha, only thing is I didn't go through all the slokas, so I'm not able to relate, but
No worry.
since you pointed out, it was very useful. Like now I can go back and see.
I like the 8th one, Paritrayanama.
Paritrana sadhunam.
Yeah, because in this world we can see when there is sort of when things go wrong, something happens and it's put right. We can see a lot of examples. I like that. And verse 34, how to obtain self-knowledge by prostration, questioning and service.
Yes.
That service thing, I was attracted, or it explained a lot, because usually service, we think we are doing, things for the guru, washing his clothes, getting, but the main reason is to bring a closeness between the guru and the student, no? That is
Correct.
Do the service.
Yes.
I didn't
And
know
also
that all.
to give, and also the service helps us to give up our ego.
Yes.
So service done the right way is the only way to give up our ego, actually,
Yeah.
Otherwise, if I keep learning all the self-knowledge and I say, oh, I know everything, that ego is still so strong. So to bow down, that's why that shloka is tat vidhi pranipatena, to prostrate, to be humble, to be, and in some of the Indian culture, when taking the right way, which is, whenever there's an elder who's speaking, don't speak, and be always mindful of giving respect to the elders. That automatically brings that tadviti pranipatena, the prostration, and
That's right. Yeah.
Now that I'm so much getting into this Indian knowledge systems, I'm seeing the beauty in each and every aspect of our culture, and how it's really powerful.
In our language, in our mother tongue, we have this aap or tum, we have the differentiation. So in English, it's just you. It's either for aap or tum, it is just you. You don't know the difference. It just is. So that really helps us, figure out how, how we are supposed to talk. And it's not just that, it's how we connect with that person, or as the situation, how that is something very, it was I did not realize this as a child or a student, But once I entered motherhood was when I realized that this apartum is something that I have to be aware of, making sure my child knows that there is up and there is tum, and there's just not you. So that was something, that was a learning experience for me.
Yeah. Beautiful. So I just noticed the time. I didn't realize the time was 7:06. I mean, because the PowerPoint was up, I couldn't see the time. But thank you. I cannot thank all of you enough because of you, you have given me the opportunity to study this even more in depth. And really, thank you very much.
Very beautiful presentation. Thank you so much, Sunitha ji.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sunitha.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sunitha. It was wonderful.
And I do owe you all which I keep doing, which is I need to reactivate my Google Drive and put all my
Oh yeah,
presentations
that's
there.
what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, can
Amol, I
you?
do owe you that article, which we should do that too. It is all on my list,
No hurry. Take your time. I know you're very busy. Yeah, take your time.
Thank you, Sunitha.
Hari Om, everyone. Hari
Hari
Om.
Om.
We will meet next week. I'll just do the last Shanti part.
Yeah, sure.
Tu sukhinah sarve santu niramayaha sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kasyat dukkha bhagave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate
Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti
Shanti Shanti Hari
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Hari Om,
Thank
Sunitha.
you.
Bye.
Hari Om. Thank